Welcome back to another episode of 8020 Optimize Your Life. Today, Sae'Von and I thought it would be prudent to have a conversation about death, have a conversation about losing a loved one. Now, when we say loved one, we literally mean anyone that you love. This can be family, this can be someone that's blood, this is going to be someone that's not. We just want to talk about what the collective experience known as death looks like in this plane, and how you can navigate it, and how you can keep on keeping on amidst losing someone close to you. So let's start with how prevalent death is, how often we lose people. I think that it was brought to everybody's attention during what's going on with coronavirus that death is something that is real. I think we've escaped for a while, potentially. It's easy to escape from death being something that could, so to speak, plague your life, because if someone very close to you hasn't died, it's easy to kind of write it off. When I was younger, I lost my father at 16 and lost a handful of people after that. And I believe we have some shared experience here. You lost some individuals close to you. Let's start with, I'd like to hear your thoughts about how that shaped the time in your life that you were going through, how that shaped you, your character, how you operate, the trauma it caused. Let's start there. I know we're going to kind of be all over the place here. It's a sensitive subject, but I think it makes sense for us to go down this path because it could provide benefit to individuals that might have had a more recent experience with death.
Absolutely.
And be struggling.
Yeah, and I think that's to just reiterate that is really the hope and the goal of this particular episode, is just as two people who have navigated and kind of got to the other side of the visceral nature of losing somebody that you care about, and life continues. You know what I mean? Life is still wonderful. Life is still amazing. And in the middle of one of those sort of circumstances, if you lose somebody, I think depending on somebody's demeanor, that can be lost. So in my situation, my sister, my older sister, she was about 7 years older, and technically she was my half-sister. We had the same father. Never really lived with each other that much, but saw her frequently enough, every month, every other month, something like that when I was younger. Sometimes those younger years are a little fuzzier. And then when I was older, we lived together. She was a senior. I think I was in 4th grade or something like that. So we lived together for about half a year. And then she moved out, and then similar things, saw her every few weeks, every few months for a little bit. But that particular situation was the second time losing somebody. Now, prior to that, my great-grandfather, who we used to live with when we were younger, he got sick, and then he was in hospice in the house, and he actually transitioned in that same house that we lived in. So that was an intense experience, but I was maybe 5, 6 years old, 7, something like that, and it was really just seeing the people around me and here's somebody who had always been around, and then they're not. And that was kind of my first experience, I feel like, with death. So it didn't really impact me too drastically at that time. And so with my sister, because I think everybody's impacted differently based on how it happens, right? Sometimes you literally get a phone call and you get the news that somebody's gone. And in both of our situations, it was more like a slow burn. Somebody gets sick, and then it kind of prepares you for that possibility as opposed to when it's very abrupt. And personally, it was kind of just one of those moments where life doesn't feel real. It's kind of like something happens, and me, I was more of the detached type. And I was detached for different reasons, jumping between houses, seeing my mom leaving, seeing my dad gone, so it was kind of just like, she just won't come back, right? And initially, like I said, it just felt like it wasn't real. She was in a car accident, and then she was in a coma for several months. And, we were at this, anyhow, she was in a coma for a few months, and then one night, it was getting pretty bad. We went to the hospital, and that's when the decision had to be made to leave her on life support or take her off. She was taken off. She transitions. And the next day I went to school. I went to see a movie that evening. And, but in that situation, I felt like what was most difficult was a couple things. One, it was this feeling of what wouldn't be, right? And I mean that in the sense that there being such a large age difference between myself and my older sister. I have an older brother as well. I'm the youngest. And they had a much closer relationship. And so when she passed, to me, it was kind of like this, damn, well, I'll never have the relationship that they had. We'll never really have that bond because she's not here for us to do that. And that led to its own difficulty, and where for years I created this resentment to my brother because I felt like being the younger brother, sometimes the older siblings are together and they're like, hey, go on, you little rascal, we got older sibling things to do. And so I had this resentment for him for years. I never really communicated it. And our relationship before that wasn't really the best. And so that was one of those unique situations where all the dynamics, have an effect on how somebody processes it. But the second effect, and both of these, there's a purpose to me going into this detail, but the second order effect was seeing my dad, right? The natural order of events is, not for the parent to lose their child, right? The parent has a child, they all age, and then, best case scenario, they just transition because they hit 150 years old or something. And they're like, you know what, I'm tapping out the game. 150 years is good enough.
Yeah.
And
usually oldest to youngest kind of thing.
Exactly.
That's how people think about it.
Yeah. And so that was and it was his firstborn child. He had her when he was 17. That was his only daughter. And seeing how it affected him, he went to a pretty dark place, depression. And I'd never really been around depression or really had to play with that concept. And so in hindsight, it kind of gave that perspective of how precious life is. And I feel like most people, they always hear that. But it's like life is precious, but relationships are also precious, because life on its own, it's like, amoeba is living, you know what I mean? But it's the connection that people share, not to overstep, but presumably, let's say that you never met your father, right? Would it move you the same way if you hear that he passed? So it's not the life in and of itself. It's the connection. And as I got older, it was this realization that, okay, at any moment in time, somebody that you're connected to, something could happen. Something can happen to you, something can happen to me, right? Or something can happen to the one that I love. So if there was some resentment I was holding, for instance, to my brother, or if my dad was in a dark place, depression, right? You can't be so overwhelmed with the negative affect or the emotion that you stop living life before you've actually passed on. And I think that is a hard thing for some people to get over, because obviously there's going to be a strong feeling, a strong emotion. Everybody processes things differently. I basically just withdrew. I kind of suppressed it. It's like I just didn't really process that it happened. It was one of those things like, well, I didn't really see her that much anyway, so, I'm just never going to see her again. And then it's like there are periods in my life where I would forget that I had a sister. So it's like that's some pretty intense suppression. And everybody responds differently. But I think if people keep in mind, it's almost like, what would that other person want? The person who passed on, would they want you to stop living life? Would they want your relationships to deteriorate because you were so distraught about what they were dealing with? I think not. And so, yeah, I'll bounce it back to you before we kind of jump to the next layer of like, how does someone best deal with it? But, those are kind of the main lessons I got, was just point blank period. Life is, is precious. And as such, if there's a dispute, if there is a disagreement, if there is a rift between you and another, even if the relationship comes to an end, maybe do your best to reconcile so that at least reconciliation is taking place and there can be some degree of closure if you never saw that person again, whether that's because you never crossed their path or because they transition. And I'd say that was kind of the main, one of the main takeaways for me.
Yeah, I mean, death is something that in this meat sack you can't escape. You won't outlive it. You won't be able to break its ankles. You cannot get away from it, regardless of how much you try. You will come to pass at some point. It is something that is difficult, I think, for a man to deal with as well, because it's out of your control. It's something for me that when I was younger rocked my sense of direction, my destiny, my capability to control where I'm at. A little backstory for those of you that don't know, and kind of in part why we decided to go down this path. My father died of stage 3B colon cancer that metastasized into lymph nodes. It then spread throughout his body, and the actual cause of death was organ failure. At the end of the day, cancer technically doesn't kill you, but it was an experience for, I guess I was 12. I was almost, so when he passed, it was like 2 months before, about 2 months before I was 17. So I was 16, and he battled for about 3.5 years. And a little bit of more backstory there. Father was a Marine, 25 years, was running 10 to 15 miles a day, crazy fitness. And out of nowhere, one day I get a call when I'm playing church basketball. We used to run that league. I got a call from when I showed up there that he had something go on when he was walking up the stairs. And out of nowhere, he was now, the doc called at the hospital and said, hey, you need to come to the emergency room right now. We've got to do an emergency procedure. And that started the 3.5-year stint with cancer. And from there, the last couple of days of his life, it didn't feel real. It was not my body or my mind trying to push it away and trying to deny it. It was me intentionally trying to pretend like it wasn't happening. I was on a leadership development weekend the week before he went into a coma for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I was looking at going to the military, so I was up in North Georgia. And when I came back on that Sunday night, he had a sit down and had a talk with us and went over. My dad had a ton of faith. He was a very strong believer in Christianity, and that he was gonna transition to heaven, and his purpose on earth was fulfilled, and that he was being called home by the Lord from his own words. And it was interesting on that Sunday. It was probably the start of bold-faced denial for me, because about 45 minutes after we had a conversation and he hugged us and kissed everybody's cheek, he fell into a coma. And for the next 72 hours, he sounded like a broken air conditioning machine, making all kinds of noise all over the place. And it wasn't until Wednesday, not very much long after that, he too, in a hospice bed in our living room, said that he wouldn't go to the hospital, that if he was gonna be taken, it would be in the comfort of his own home. And it was a surreal experience. I was the last person to touch his arm, and it changed me. But from there, I went into the bold-faced denial phase of, no, this is not real. This has got to be a dream. This is not something that happens. But I put on a face that, no, I knew that this was just meant for me, and this is my future, and I'm just going to continue to live. And my dad would want me to do da 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 da. But frankly, after he passed, I started drinking heavily. I started drinking a lot. I started partying a lot. I started pretending like everything was okay. I used that escapism to run the other direction, and it's not something I would recommend for anybody. It is not the way to go. I actually had a very not so fun run-in with the law when I was 16, about a month and a half, right before I turned 17, because I was out doing stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. And all of that to say that I do not believe that if he hadn't passed, that I would be the same person I am today. And so I'm thankful that I had the amount of years that I had with him. I'm thankful that I had a father growing up. I had an example of the man to be, how to treat women, how to treat others, how to lead with a servant's heart. I don't believe that I would have the same outlook on a lot of things had I not lost him. I don't believe that I would view women the way that I do had I not had him in my life. I am very thankful for having had him. However, I think I've reconciled with the fact that it was something that needed to happen as I was on my journey at that age, and I didn't understand it, and I broke down 6 months later aggressively when I gave a speech at a funeral of a friend of mine that passed away in a hot tub. Some things, some people, some experiences are meant to uncover things about yourself. They're also very visceral recommendations, or not recommendations, reminders that life is precious. But again, I agree with what you're saying. Not life is precious because we're living, because if there's no interconnectivity, then what the hell are we doing anyways? But life is precious because you don't know, this could be the last time we record a podcast. One of us could be gone tomorrow, tonight, the next day. So are we going to not try to pour our whole ass into this, the collective shared experience here, the interconnectivity that we have and the things that we're interested in, the conversations that we could go in? Are we not going to put aside differences even if they come up for the betterment of the relationship? Because that is why life is precious. So I only go to all that detail to really just represent the amount of growth that the death of my father brought me. But it didn't happen in 6 months. It didn't happen in 2 years. It is, what's today? The 12th of May, 2021. It happened when I was 16. I'm 26. It took 10 years to get here, to be able to look back on the experience and understand that, hey, I don't know all the reasons, but I have been shown a few why it happened the way it happened. And actually, I believe that without that, how would I be able to give advice, to be a support, to be there for other individuals that go through this later? So I know that's a lot and it's kind of all over the place, but it is. Death is something you just won't escape. I know we love to think we can. We won't. Not in this plane. No chance.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we recorded this, I told James, like, we got to end on some type of high note, man. This can't just be sad shit, but.
And we've got some time. We're not trying to
No. We're definitely not ending right now. But I think, because I'm really just trying to stay mindful of the person who asked you to maybe go over this topic, that for that reason, knowing that we're all going to transition at some point. Sure, it's people out here who are on this futuristic shit, I'm going to live forever. It's like, maybe, but I doubt it. I feel like life in and of itself will find a way to make sure you don't live forever. Maybe you live longer, maybe that's 1,000 years instead of 100. But, at some point, a car can have 1,000,000 miles on it. At some point, you're going to have to lay that baby down, and I don't think, and this is something in the Black community that is, I notice is we don't have funerals. We have homegoing services. And they're often viewed as these celebrations of life.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, because I've been to funerals for folks that aren't Black, and oftentimes it's very stoic. It's like people are discouraged from crying, from sharing their emotions. And I think that that's part of what can create these blockages that never really go away, or they take years to go away because the person didn't allow themselves to feel. And as you were talking, it actually reminded me of more of what actually were kind of the next steps after my sister passed. And there was a lot of anger that got created that I didn't really draw the parallel between, but everybody responds differently. You mentioned you started partying, drinking, right? There's all different ways people find to cope. And typically, I find that there's a higher proportion of coping if there is a lower proportion of expressing that feeling, letting it flow outward.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the biggest differences among communities, is that some communities, it's kind of like it happens, people die, move on. And then you have the other extreme is where people don't ever move on and they're just sad every day, and you walk in their house and, there's this shrine to somebody that passed and it sits there for 20 years. And I think both are unhealthy, because if somebody's gone, the fact of the matter is they're gone. They're not here anymore physically. And so to just simply remind oneself every day, granted, there's that other balance of to keep somebody's spirit alive, but you don't have to try to keep their spirit alive for their spirit to stay alive. And I think that in some instances, it actually causes people more grief than if they were to just simply express how they felt, process it, and then let it go and move on and focus on the living and not the lived. And of course, that's easier said than done, but it's a process, and ultimately life is here for one to live, and for that, it's hard to do it if you're focused on the death, because the death is just a moment, but life is 99.99% of it. So why focus more on that 0.00001% than you do on the life lived? So that's the other thing. Celebrate people while they're here, man. To your point, it's like, we see each other every week, right? And we force that through an accountability group, but it's not like we did that because we're like, oh, one day we're going to die, But I had this realization, even this past Mother's Day. There were people I grew up with, their mothers, you know what I mean? One of my aunts that I don't think I have my adult life ever have told her Happy Mother's Day, and it just hit me different of like, like express that you care about people. One can say, don't wait till Mother's Day to, say something, but just that idea of telling people you care about them now.
But better Mother's Day than they pass and you never say it.
Exactly. And too often I think people, they wait until some moment when it's too late and that person can't hear you. Maybe their spirit hears you, but they don't hear you, to communicate how they really felt about them, whether it's just a friend you got a lot of love for, whether it's a colleague that you got a lot of love for. People get weird sometimes about that word love.
Very. I've thrown that word love around much more in 2021 and been not flippant with it, but been intentional and made sure that individuals that I love, regardless of what type of love, I mean, we can go into agape and da-da-da.
Yeah.
Like, there's many types of love, the arrows. It's not all the same. But if you have love for somebody or you love somebody, you need to make sure that they know.
Yeah.
For no benefit of anybody's, except for them understanding.
And they're hearing it while they're here.
Yeah. And you're not waiting until you have to, draw a mural on the wall because you never actually took the time to care about somebody while they're here.
Because some people, it's like they might feel that you care, but it's just amazing if you just texting somebody out the blue, like, hey man, thinking about you. Miss you. Let's catch up.
You remember when Garrett was on and he said to take your phone out and scroll and stop and say something? I think it's the same kind of sentiment.
Yep.
Reaching out to people that maybe you're not up with every week. Maybe you are the individuals that you have resentment towards in your family or in your past or what have you. You don't need to, open up wounds all over the place. But there are probably people that don't know that you foster resentment towards them, that love you and might question it sometimes why they've never heard from you, or they always have to reach out.
Yeah.
Could be something to look at. I mean, another point here is that people are dying every day. People die every day. I think that, coronavirus and a few other things more recently have made that very apparent, that life can be taken from somebody. But with that, I don't think that it should turn anyone into Chicken Little, running around with their head cut off. I think it should, in fact, just open up the door for you being more intentional. Intentional with your time, intentional with your love, intentional with your words. Understand that, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt is bullshit.
Yeah.
Truly what you say might be the last thing that somebody hears forever. And you might throw hate at somebody and then you die. And now now you've left them with guilt because they didn't bring it up to your attention and you're not here anymore. You got to show love. Loved ones is not confined to blood. It's not confined to romantic partners. I have very, very much love for people that are in my life that I spend a lot of time with. You and AJ on Sunday, a lot of love. Someone that I see consistently every week as well, Maddie, a lot of love. My partner right now, feel a lot of, let me say like.
Why you do her like that? He loved you too, but like you said, there's a lot of types of love. Don't hold it against him.
But it is, I'm being funny, but.
She gonna get you, boy.
Set myself up for that one.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of love for everybody that I spend that I spend time with consistently, that I intentionally spend time with consistently. And it is, I've got love for somebody that I work out with a good bit, you know, old Jake, even though he's an interesting cat.
Yeah.
I got a lot of love for him. There's something to be said for making sure that you let them know that you love them before it's too late, but not because you feel like you have to, because you should be affirming them. You should be reaffirming them. You should let them know that they matter to you. You don't know who's struggling with what. You don't know who's lost someone recently. You don't know who hasn't shared with you that they might be losing someone soon from some prognosis or diagnosis or something going on. Or those individuals that are struggling with suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, sometimes it's helpful just to let somebody know that they have support, that they have people in their corner that care about them or thinking about them and want the best for them. Because in times like these that we're living in, some folks don't quite know that. And a simple, hey, thinking about you, hey, let's catch up, you know, can make all the world of a difference. So,
yeah, I don't have too much else. I don't want to beat a dead horse out here, but I believe that, you know, making sure that those in your life know that you care, know that you love them, and showing up for people. If you give someone some of your word that you're going to be there for them, you got to show up when your ticket's called, you know, when your card is punched. Got to show up. Don't be throwing that around flippantly, because that will definitely leave a lasting impression on somebody in a negative manner. So, yeah, not all sad out here.
Nah, definitely not. We celebrate life, baby. We celebrate
Absolutely.
life. And there's lots of life to be lived. So, you know, let's stay in the land of the living and keep on living.
Absolutely. Thank y'all for coming out, and we will see you next episode.
Amen. Peace.
Peace.